The time has come for Luffy to once again prove his worth to another member of the former Pirate King's crew. But while he is distracted doing so, there are malicious forces closing in on Elbaph, and more specifically, the Walrus School.
Yeah, a lot to talk about, but before we get too deep into all of that, we're going to start off where we always do with another installment of the cover series. And as we expected, the traders that were brought before Who's Who in the previous edition were not Yamato and company, but instead two previous members of the Toby Roppo in Ulti and Page 1, the former of whom is now strapped to a giant dartboard.
Yeah, with what looks like samurai swords being thrown at her. And it might be a bit odd to see former members of the same crew attacking each other in this manner, but that kind of was the whole vibe of the Beast Pirates too, was that you could challenge everyone to a fight if you wanted a higher position. And now that Kaido's gone, it kind of seems like that power vacuum has just resulted in this kind of infighting between them.
Yeah, and it would seem like Who's Who is one of the ones that you would expect to kind of rise the ranks once Kaido's gone. And you never got the vibe that any of them really liked each other throughout the crew. It really was a lot of animosity, similar to how the Rocks Pirates were even, which would make sense with Kaido having come from them.
Plus, I think it makes sense. I don't think Momo is well trained or developed enough to really have established himself as like the ultimate ruling power in Wano yet.
Even if he has, they're not going to respect that. They're not going to follow that. They're going to keep trying to keep up their own regimes.
But I think that this is an interesting insight, and I'm glad that we finally got to see something of substance come from this cover series.
Yeah.
So let's turn our focus now to the chapter itself. And we'll start with the very title of this chapter being Scopper Gaban. Not an uncommon practice to have a character name be the title. And really just a strong indicator that we're going to hear a lot more either about his past or his character in this chapter. Not very long after finally meeting him. So Oda's not wasting a lot of time introducing him to us.
Yeah, and we don't necessarily get an explicit backstory like some other character chapters. But we do get to see a version of Scopper that seems much more authentic than anything we've gotten up to this point. More of an insight into his true pirate self.
So let's start on page 1, where Luffy is rightfully confused now that Gaban has led him to this key and is now challenging him to a fight for this key. But all it really takes Gaban to goad him with the right words to instantly kick him into battle and start the fight that he wants.
Yeah, just what? You scared? You can't take me? You don't think you can get this key? Hops right at him.
It doesn't take a lot to get under Luffy's skin.
No, and I mean, Nami's just like, hey man, what are you doing? Zoro, on the other hand, remembers Gaban is Colin's dad, and he remembers the words that he said, that he was a fierce pirate and wasn't even scared of the giants themselves. So I think he realized better than Luffy what he's about to get himself into.
And as we transition onto the next page, we can see exactly the gambit that Gaban's running here, as when Luffy tries to reach out to grab him, all he has to do is hop to the side, and once he starts to hit him with more and more like a gatling of grabs, he just dodges each and every one so gracefully that none of them even touch him.
Yeah, and it's kind of throwing him off. He's not fully committed to the battle, but he has at least engaged to a certain degree. But very suddenly, Scopper just hops right into action and really catches Luffy off guard.
Yeah, he jumps up in the air above him, and Luffy even notes himself that he can see he's imbuing this key with Haki, and the nerd in me can't help but see like a Kingdom Hearts Keyblade too when he's using it, but he holds it overhead with this crackling Haki, and as he brings it down on the next page, he just crushes Luffy beneath it without hesitation. So this fight has gone from like a cat and mouse game to an immediate fight right away.
Yeah, and just buries him in rubble because, of course, the place they're fighting has already been torn to shreds. And while everyone else is freaking out, like, what's going on? You know, Road thought he knew this guy. Why is he suddenly attacking his friend? Luffy just comes up even more enraged, like, what are you doing? And before he can even fully react, Gaban's right back poking the hornet's nest. Says, you know, that's a nice straw hat you've got there.
And, I mean, of course, once the Straw Hat comes into it, Luffy is very defensive.
It's got a special place for him.
He's like, yeah, it does suit me better than the helmet. It's because it was given to me. It was gifted to me by Shanks, and I'm holding on to it because I promised him I would take care of it.
Yeah, and he tries to again be like, hey man, just give me the key. But Gaban already has latched onto that and says, oh, he's just lending it to you? You're just holding it for him? He didn't just give that to you? What a cheapskate. And that, of course, gets right under his skin, gets him going even more.
I mean, this is the second time in this arc now that somebody's kind of attacked
in
Shanks'
short order,
character.
Yeah.
So he's very on edge about his mentor at the moment.
You guys talking about him like this?
But this is very amusing to Gaban, because as he can see he's getting more and more flustered and unfocused, he uses this opportunity to just slam the key into Luffy's face as it stretches around it, being shoved in his mouth. He's not holding back and just messing around with this kid.
No, and he continues to flex his might as he then very quickly draws his dual axes. And while Zoro is at least able to see, like, wait, this guy's got blades on him suddenly, he tries to warn him, but Gaban just launches right into his next attack. The first named attack that we've gotten out of him, Grim Throng.
And I think I really like the detail, too, that Zoro knows cutting attacks are the one thing Luffy really does not do well with. So now that that's not just a blunt weapon, he's like, oh, I gotta step in and help.
And you gotta dodge. Just get out of the line of this real quick.
And as he tries to, I don't know if he fully would have made this dodge, but luckily his first mate is there to step in and sort of block the attack as it's coming, or at least part of it, because the rest of it still very much connects with something else.
Yeah, it cuts off a whole tower segment of the castle, and we see it just cut clean off, start falling down to the underworld below.
And in a similar manner to even Kuma before him approving of Luffy's crew members coming to his defense, Gaban also notes that he does have a fine crew to serve him and protect him in these moments. But poor Road and Nami are still just in absolute shock at what they just witnessed. And they can't help but do anything as these two are now standing down each other in like real serious combat forms, with Luffy now entering Gear 5.
Yeah, and this also excites Gaban. You can see that look in his eye of like, oh, this is the white form I've been hearing about, because obviously the Giants will have talked about this at a great length.
I also do find it funny that Luffy's just holding the axe that was just like either in the room or thrown at him, and now he's like, I've never used an axe before, but I'm gonna cut this guy because he used an axe against me.
Yeah, I mean, he does get excited whenever he's presented with the opportunity to use blades, even though he's not good with them. So
oh yeah,
can't really blame him.
But as these two are about to face off, we do see the falling tower falling apart before immediately just crashing into the ground, just demonstrating how large this place is, that even this massive castle was falling for this whole time, and only now is crushing it below. Part of me thought it was going to hit Loki, but I feel like he suffered enough for a while.
Yeah. And I mean, you see Zoro and Luffy now fully, like, brace yourself. He's about to attack again. More axe attacks coming. As you see this crazy look in Gaban's eye. And then just surrenders, throws his hands up.
Yeah.
I'm done.
I give up. It's over. And clearly, very clearly, in an effort to mess with them further, as we see both Zoro and Luffy just so bothered. He's like, are you kidding me?
What do you mean?
You get me all fired up and you're just messing around with us?
I was just fooling around, laughing about it. Like, don't get all worked up. He's like, what do you mean? You tried to kill me. You're still alive, aren't you? Just, even now that he's not engaged anymore, still poking fun at him.
And almost as a way to, like, drive it in even further, he's like, by the way, the whole thing you wanted to get from this fight anyway is standing right behind you.
Yeah, slipped it behind him without him even noticing. He's like, oh, well, that still hasn't changed. I don't like you. And I mean, Road tries to tell them something about him. Like, this guy is, but he cuts him off before he can reveal anything. And then addresses the crew again, saying, but it's kind of an ominous statement that if Elbaph is still safe by the time they decide to leave, they should come find him.
I think he was well aware that Loki being released is not going to be the most peaceful thing for the island.
Yeah, true.
But it is kind of also setting a goal for them, being like, if you're so motivated, keep everything safe, prove you can handle it, and then come see me.
Well, my only thing was, it's like, bro has a whole family here. He's not going to help make the island safe if it becomes unsafe. Like, come on, man.
We'll see. We'll see. He's a little bit crazy.
Yeah, he's a bit of a goon. Old kook.
And very clearly did what he came here to do, too, giving him the key and kind of testing Luffy. He just starts walking off onto the next page. Luffy is just so pissed, and he's like, why would I ever come see you? I don't want to see you ever again. I don't care if I save everybody. I don't want anything to do with you. And Gaban is just laughing, because he's like, okay, I've heard about you, but now I see the real deal.
Yeah, and we see some of what he's heard. We don't know exactly what was said, but Shanks was telling him, like, this kid's the real deal. And he's just like, you think I would just trust him blindly like that? And, you know, Shanks understands. You do what you want to do. And basically establishes, like, yeah, go ahead and test him however you like, Gaban. Like, have fun with him. And then we cut over to the Walrus School, where, as we had mentioned before, these kids are in grave danger.
They're in trouble. And it seems very lighthearted to start off with. The kids just trying to get Angie's attention to point out this really odd-looking bird they saw off in the distance. You can barely see a dot of it. But they're like, yeah, it's so odd. And even Angie's like, yeah, I don't know what that is. But we know what that is.
Yeah, not good, as they're flying through the realm of the sun. They're that high up. And they spot the school and go, oh, that's perfect. That's exactly where we're about to go. We can get all the kids right now.
And now that they have located their target, they don't waste a whole lot of time getting to business. As they've shown, they don't mess around here. Gunko just sticks out her hand and curls her hand into a claw, and immediately a summoning circle, like we've seen many times recently, is put right before them, calling for those God's Knights that they were asking for earlier.
Yep, and we get the same black bolt of lightning that strikes down into the ground that we've seen just signifies that they're touching down, that they're being transported to this spot.
And as we see these two God's Knights standing before these black bolts causing fire to spread all around them, we do see two silhouetted figures who seem like they were honestly interrupted mid-conversation to even accept being here. As one of them's like, oh, okay, I understand, I'll go. And the other one's like, oh yeah, I'm leaving, I just gotta get there right now. But then he says the name, the Abyss, will be where now? Giving a name to what seems like this sort of teleportation that we've seen a few times now. And just for calling it the Abyss is a very interesting title, and it kind of makes me think of like wormhole concepts, where it's like there's nothingness between space and time.
Yeah, definitely seems to reinforce the idea that these are truly demonic entities, or some sort of like hellish power that they're tapping into in order to even make this sort of travel.
And on to the next page. As we see their shadows begin to fade, we are able to finally see who these two individuals are in a more clear light. And we see what looks like an elderly gentleman at first, very normal. And then we see a very odd looking figure wearing a sort of bubble. He seems to have like a dragon-like appearance and like a breathing apparatus. But there's so much to both of these characters that I think it's just best we break them down one at a time.
As first, we'll start with Saint Shepherd Sommers. And this is the older of the two men that's been transported. And he's still just sitting in his boxer briefs, apparently on a couch, and asking for some sort of provision due to the ongoing siege.
And another interesting thing of note that will become more relevant to a point made later in this chapter is that there's also a tattoo or like a mark on his left elbow that looks just like the summoning circle and very clearly might be connected to it in some way. But I also think it's interesting to note his house name being Shepherd very likely indicates some sort of relation to Shepherd Jupiter, one of the Gorosei.
Yeah, it seems almost undoubtable that it would be, and would make sense that he would still be within the nobility of the Celestial Dragons to have earned the Holy Knight ranks in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. But that also leads us to what I think is probably the more interesting looking of the two.
Yeah, definitely.
Being, and we had to double check the translation on this, but we believe it's St. Kiringham Limoshiv. Some translations say like Kiringham. It's a bit odd, but we believe it is Kiringham. A house name that we haven't heard yet, and also a figure with an unusually long neck, scales, like I mentioned before, a breathing device. to help with that bubble and more, and he truly just looks unlike any race we've ever seen in the story before. But we believe it's probably because it's not his race, but rather a mythical zone, specifically the one modeled Kirin.
And this would explain his dragon-like head, ossicones, and he also has a ribbon that often signifies awakening, but his is, interestingly, white, like Luffy's is.
And so that might indicate he might not be as evil, I guess, as some of these other people, or didn't awaken it in a harsher way. We really don't know a lot about awakenings at this point in the story, but him having that ribbon is what more leads us to believe this is likely the effect of a devil fruit rather than his race. And now that these two have arrived, seemingly completely unexpectedly right at once, they do kind of gather their surroundings and first notice their friends that they've seen before. Oh, Gunko, Shamrock, you're in my house? What are you doing here?
Yeah, it takes them a good moment. Like, they still think they're wherever they got transported from.
And I do find it really funny that in the tiny corner you see Gunko just blushing a little bit, seeing her colleague in his underwear.
Yeah.
Unexpectedly, like this cold killer who just summoned a demon circle is blushing at a man in his boxer briefs.
Hey man, they're all but humans.
Yeah, it is kind of humanizing to their side.
Even on the upper, like, evil squads, there's still a couple goons and just funny relationships, little oddities, because they all have their own personalities.
But once these two have had a second to really see where they are, they realize that, oh, we agreed to go to Elbaph, and now we're in Elbaph. Now, immediately afterwards. So they have been sent here instantaneously before they could even finish their conversations.
Yeah, and Sommers is like, my couch is here too? That's crazy.
It's a good thing it is, because now that they have had a chance to, like, see where they are, luckily, Kiringham was already in what looks like his God's Night attire, but Sommers is just in the background getting dressed, getting ready, and Kiringham finally notes, he's like, wow, this place is huge, this is massive. I can't believe I'm in the land of giants. But Shamrock also notices not only are the God's Knights here, but there's one more than he requested, so he's a bit curious as to why.
Yeah, and Kiringham explains that this is actually due to an order they were given to have him return to the Holy Land. As Sommers explains, the worsening conditions of Marijois and the need for their champion to return to defend it.
So it does seem like the siege that Dragon has been operating is really having its effects being felt by the Celestial Dragons at this point.
To the point that we're finally going to get the Holy Knights intervening.
But before he could really, like, be dismissed to go back to Marijois and have to leave this mission, Sommers does ask, he's like, okay, I guess I'm here now. Why don't you fill me in as to why we're in this nation that's not even affiliated with the world government? And then very interestingly says, were you visiting Harald's grave or something? To Shamrock, which draws a bit of a weird connection between those two characters you wouldn't have thought would have existed.
Yeah, why is the first thought that he would be visiting the grave of the former Elbaph king? That is not a connection at all that you would expect from the leader of the Holy Knights.
Yeah, the concept of the God's Knights paying respects to a non-affiliate membered nation leader. I'm really starting to think Harald's peaceful philosophy might have stemmed from a sense of world government propaganda. And it does throw into question his own character, his morality, how his people view him, and maybe even how Loki's character really is if he was maybe taking a lot of the heat for what his father should have been feeling.
Yeah, it definitely opens up a whole lot of new possibilities, because we don't really know. We just know what the giants assume to be the truth.
But it does seem like we're going to learn a lot more about the real history as the clock is now being set. There's a brief cut ahead in time. Shamrock fills them in on what their mission is here to abduct these kids to gain a bargaining chip. And without any qualms or questions, they immediately start plotting, okay, well, we can normally stuff kids in a sack, but these are giant kids, so we can't put them in a sack.
Yeah, I don't got enough pockets for all them.
And Kiringham's like, yeah, and they also don't have the mark, so we can't use the abyss, calling back to the point I was referencing before, that tattoo or mark on Summer's elbow might be a certain mark you have to use this teleportation we've seen by the Gorosei and the God's Knights now.
Yeah, the dark mark from Harry Potter, but way cooler.
Yeah, way cooler side effects. But as a result of these children not having that mark, and seemingly they don't have the ability to bestow it, they're going to have to find a way to bring these kids on ships back to the Holy Land, making sure that they're going to be out of Marie Joie for a while, actually.
But this doesn't deter Shamrock. In fact, he actually gets, at least the closest we've seen to this point, almost excited by the thought of, well, we could make a game out of this, which really just draws the parallels that he is undoubtedly his father's kid.
No, the look in his eyes is most definitely reminiscent of Garling on God Valley, taking the immediate penalty just to make the game more fun for himself.
You are your daddy's son.
They're sickos, and they are gonna not waste a whole lot of time, because as they've demonstrated before, they don't mess around.
I also just want to say, Angie cooked.
So, very possible that if these people attack the children before any real fighters can get there, there's only one real person I could think of in that group that's really gonna retaliate and fight back against the abduction, and that would be Colin.
Yeah, he's the rowdy one. He's the one who's looking for a scrap in the first place.
So, while they might want to hold these children for bargaining chips, out of everybody on this island, I am really scared for Colin's expectancy to make it to the end of this arc.
Yeah, which is a terrifying thought, because, like, as far as his character, he's a kid. But, I mean, they already established he's really 20 years old. I hate the idea, but it also would be some great storytelling and just show the absolute cruelty of the God's Knights if something were to happen to him specifically. It would also get Scopper really fired.
Oh, yeah. It would undoubtedly bring him into the fray where he couldn't just sit back and watch anymore. But Oda doesn't like to kill. What better way to really establish how savage these people are, to view people as points in a hunting game, to actually have him be one of the few that does kill somebody in the story. And
I mean, that's what God Valley basically was. Why would that stop at the adults? They wouldn't care about the lives of the children either.
So there's a lot of danger coming in the coming chapter, and while Luffy did get what he was after in this chapter, it's only a matter of time before he comes across the scene of what the God's Knights did to Loki as well. And once he's aware that there's an even greater threat on this island, it's really just going to be a matter of, is Loki going to help? Is he a good guy as we learn more about him? What's the real history going on here? And is anybody going to be able to help these kids?
Yeah, well, and it's crazy because just a few chapters ago even, I was firmly on the side of, I do not want Luffy to release Loki. At this point, do it. I want to see what he's really got. I want to see, if he maybe isn't even as evil purely as we may have thought.
Maybe he wants to destroy this world because he knows how bad it is.
Yeah, maybe he means like the second world, something like that.
So, Elbaph needs a hero. We need somebody to step up to buy these kids some real time before the true warriors can get there. And there's just so much to come in the next chapter, and luckily we only have to wait until next week to get more. So, until then, be sure to like the video if you enjoyed the review, subscribe if you're new or keep finding yourself back on this channel just to come back for more content in the future, comment what you think will happen to these giant children, and as always, be crew.